So, as you know, international borders have been closed for the past, say, 5-6 months right now, and that has left a lot of foreign citizens stranded abroad, myself included. I've been trying to get to Nigeria for the past 2 months, but I wasn't able to do that. But luckily, the Nigerian government launched a series of evacuation flights to help get stranded citizens out of whatever country they're stuck in. People have been evacuated from the UK, Saudi Arabia, Malaysia, Sudan, just to name a few. And a couple of days ago, I was part of the last batch to be evacuated from the USA on Ethiopian Airlines. And maybe you're wondering what that experience was like. Now, this video was initially supposed to be a review of Ethiopian Airlines, but I thought it would be much richer if I shared the whole evacuation experience instead. So I had an early start that morning. I had to fly from Houston to New Jersey on a 3-hour flight. The evacuation flight was scheduled to leave from New Jersey to Nigeria, so that explains that first little trip. But I knew the rest of the journey was going to be extremely stressful. I found it usually is when traveling to Nigeria, so I had to keep psyching myself up for it. We touched down in Newark International Airport at about 1:30 in the afternoon, but my flight was later that night at 9:15 p.m. So that's a whole 8-hour layover, which is brutal. But I was like, well, that will give me some time to just get everything sorted and rest a bit before the flight, right? Once I got my luggage, switched terminals, I was greeted by this huge line that literally extended all the way outside the doors of the terminal. It seemed like every single Nigerian on this flight was 8 hours early. Nigerians are never late to any flights, never. This line moved terribly slowly, and I think it's because there was one person in charge of conducting the whole thing and making sure people were getting in line properly. But in addition to that, there were also a lot of protocols that we had to observe in the line. Like there were these medical personnel who would come up to each passenger and request a copy of their COVID test. A COVID test was part of the requirements to get on the flight. You had to take a test, and it had to be no older than 14 days, and it had to be negative. If your test was not negative, you would not get on the flight. Another requirement was that you had to agree to wear a mask throughout the flight, and you had to have some hand sanitizer with you to use periodically. When you get to the front of that line, there's some more medical personnel that you give your passport and the COVID test results again, and then they place a red sticker on your passport. Then they redirect you to some more medical staff on the other side, and there they take your temperature, and they also write down your temperature on the red sticker that was placed on your passport. If your temperature is too high or you're deemed to have a fever, you are not allowed to board the flight. After this, you can finally get in the next line to check in. I think the whole process from me getting in line at the beginning to checking in took about almost 3 hours. Passing through security was straightforward. It took no time at all, and once that was done, I started to get excited that I was finally going to be flying Ethiopian Airlines. I had heard so many good things about Ethiopian. It's even regarded as Africa's best airline. And I knew the aircraft was a Boeing 787-9, the Dreamliner, so I was even more hype about the whole thing. The waiting area was packed with people. I was like, what happened to social distancing? It was crazy. I mean, people tried to keep some space between them when they sat on the chairs, but even in the lines before, it was just the typical pushing people, shoving, squeezing into tight spaces. It's like, what? Aren't we supposed to be social distancing here? There's so many people, it's insane. Wow, like social distancing out the window. And boarding was terrible. I think it took about an hour and a half from the time they announced boarding till the time we actually started getting on the flight. They tried to coordinate the whole thing using color codes. Everybody had to have either a blue, red, or yellow sticker, but it didn't make sense because we all received a red sticker before we checked in. It was just like a freestyle. Everybody started getting upset. People were just insulting one another. People were cutting line. It was terrible.
Do you have red on your boarding pass? You can join. I mean, oh my goodness.
Given the fact that this was an evacuation flight, I tried to lower my expectations and just cut the crew some slack because I wasn't sure that normal service was going to be resumed on this flight because this was kind of a different, unusual flight. But the air hostess at the front was very welcoming, had a smile on her face. You could see it even through the mask. So that was nice. But the one problem immediately we got on the plane was that it was boiling hot. It was so bad. Everybody was screaming at the air hostesses to turn on the air conditioners or to give them water or Panadol. I mean, usually since the pandemic, on flights, at least one seat in, like the middle seat in every row is empty. But on this flight, every single seat was taken. After takeoff, the ACs kicked in and temperature began to normalize, but one lady had actually fainted because of how bad it was. This was going to be an 11-hour flight, so you can imagine my disgust when I found that the in-flight entertainment was not available. All we were stuck with was the welcome to Ethiopian screen, and that's all we had to look at the whole flight. But at least the screen itself was nice to look at because it was a newer model and it had a USB port which you could charge your devices. There was also a control panel on the armrest of the seat which had the overhead light button, some controls for the screen, and also the light to get the crew's attention. Not the biggest fan of that because it is a bit uncomfortable when you want to rest your elbow on it and you're pressing the buttons, but apart from that, the seat was pretty decent. I was delighted to see that they were actually serving hot meals on this flight. For the main meal, we had a choice between chicken, fish, or beef. I got the chicken dish and it came with a lovely rice and sweet tomato sauce. There was also some cheddar cheese, a bread roll, some crackers, and cheesecake for dessert. It was so good, I was surprised because usually on flights, when you have a grilled chicken, it can be very dry. But this was perfectly cooked, very juicy and tender, and just the rice and the tomato sauce went really well together, so it was an amazing meal. The crew was kind of involved, but not really. I guess they found that they didn't have that much to do because after the meal service, a lot of passengers just passed out. Everybody was so tired. So the crew really didn't have to do that much. But I was really happy to see that they woke people up to serve breakfast. I wasn't expecting breakfast, but that was nice to have. We had a choice between eggs and pancakes, and I got the egg dish. It came with some mixed vegetables and a sausage, and there was also a bread roll and a croissant. It was a pretty decent breakfast. The flight itself was smooth, really comfortable. I sat next to a little child who made no noise at all. She was very well behaved, so that was very comfortable for me. When we finally landed in Nigeria, everybody was just overcome with tears, singing, applause. Nigerians. People were just relieved to be back home. So once you get out of the plane and make it to the main terminal building, you are yet again greeted with another line. This time it's a line to submit your COVID test again, and they actually give you some forms to fill out while you're in line. One of them is like an appointment sheet to take a COVID test in Nigeria, and the other one is just some demographics and contact information. When you get to the front of the line and you turn in all the documents you had just filled out in the line, then they write an appointment for you to take your COVID test. So I have to take another COVID test in 2 days' time just to confirm that I am negative again. So after that, we headed through immigration where they take your passport and keep it. And you can only get your passport back after the 14 days of quarantine and after your second COVID test has come back negative. I guess they're trying to make sure that people don't travel while having the disease. Moving on from there, I went to get my luggage, and again, it was just chaos. And after getting all your bags, you have to put them through a scanner, hand luggage included, which takes time and just builds another long line with everybody waiting for the scanner. And just when you think you're all done, another line. This time you had to give them a copy of your yellow appointment slip, which you had been given earlier and had filled out some information on. And they handwrite all the details you provided, your name, phone number, email address. And that just takes even more time because everything is handwritten for all these passengers in line. After that, they direct you to a medical staff on the side who gives you this care package with some hand sanitizer, a thermometer, and some masks. And also this packet with some general information about COVID, how to self-isolate, and how to use the thermometer as well. And there's also a section in here where you're supposed to log your temperature twice a day, 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. during the 14 days of quarantine. And also note down if you have any symptoms. If you do have any symptoms, then there are instructions in here about contacting the hotline for the Nigerian Center for Disease Control. And after you're given these last few things, you can finally leave the airport and go home. Oh man, it's just exhausting thinking about all this stuff again. But I'm glad I made it back in one piece at least. I will say I think the COVID packet and the care package were a very nice touch, and I was shocked to see that they put this together for every single passenger. So thumbs up to the Nigerian government on that one. But that was the whole evacuation experience with a little Ethiopian Airlines flight review in there. I hope it provided some insight into what the whole situation is like, and maybe if you are planning on getting on an evacuation flight, now you know what to expect. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.